Hi, and welcome to the Bookkeepers Podcast. I'm Zoe Whitman. I'm here with Joe Wood. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Zoe. I'm good. It's been a couple of weeks and no podcast. I'm excited to be back.
Oh, yes. Super pleased to have you back too. We are really excited to be joined by Glen Foster today from Libeo. And we're going to be talking about managing the payment process for your clients, which is maybe something we probably haven't spoken about this on the podcast before, but it comes at a time where this is a challenge that comes up all the time, isn't it? With clients wanting you to look after their payment runs, but having different views on whether you want to get involved in like having access to the bank account and things. So really nice to have a chat with Glen about that, and also helping our clients with some things around, managing their cash flow and just best practice. So Glen, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
And nice to see everyone joining as well. I can see Leander watching live. If you're watching live, let us know that you're here. Feel free to ask questions. We love to have interactive podcast episodes. Glen, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about Libeo?
Yeah, sure. We are an accounts payable tool is how we describe ourselves. So we're a software product that deals with the collation and centralization of supplier invoices. So there's OCR technology built in there. There's approvals built in, so you do in-app approvals, which then all feeds through to being able to do what we call one-click payments. So the ability to bulk pay invoices in effectively one click of a button, which hopefully streamlines that process of chasing invoices as a bookkeeper and trying to get them all in the same place, which is like often a lever arch file or something like that. And then that ability to go and try and get different people to approve invoices before you actually get to the point where you're ready to prepare a payment run.
Yeah, and if we start like at the beginning of this, as a business owner, if you're trying to manage and you haven't got a bookkeeper, thinking about the headache that this causes, obviously, and I've seen it with our own clients, they get put on stop if they haven't, paid the payments, the invoices in time, but then they haven't really had a chance to check against the orders and check that the invoice is correct. And then there might not be the money to make that payment, but they really need to do that next order. And you can see that if you really look at it from a business owner's point of view, that this is such a fundamental, big issue for many businesses. And I know that you're when I've watched Libeo before, you've spoken about the restaurants and the food and those kind of commercial hospitality kind of industries. You can imagine the amounts of paperwork and the amounts of receipts and delivery notes and orders and all of this that need to be collated and checked, and the stuff's coming in the back door and being prepared and going out the front, and that's like this is such a big deal. And so I can see how sometimes bookkeepers think, wow, this is a really big responsibility to take on. And sometimes they shy away from it. But it really is about getting a really good process in place. And actually you can add so much value. And that's half the battle with a business owner. They don't know where to start and they just fumble through. And really having a smooth process can really help with this situation, can't it?
Oh, definitely. Our CEO tells a great story. Like two of our co-founders were restaurateurs. And he says, I founded this or invested in this restaurant chain. We were growing it. I love food. I use like stereotypical French, right? He's called Pierre, likes food and wine. But he wanted to grow this restaurant chain because he's passionate about like food and wine. But actually what he really needed to be passionate about was like paying bills and paperwork and administration, and wasn't. And he's like, that's what I spent most of my time doing, not doing what I really wanted to do. And that's where Libeo kind of came from. He was like, well, actually, maybe I should go and find some people to help build a solution to this, because it's a major issue in the fact that you can't grow your business if you're spending so much time on the administration of
it. Absolutely. And I mean, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that people, bookkeepers or business owners aren't really thinking about, that's like the fundamentals? So, is it a case that I see a lot of the time people think they're being really good by paying invoices as soon as they receive them. That's something, because it's like touching that piece of paper just the once. They don't want to have to deal with it again. So then they pay with things then and there. What are the other kind of things that people do that just make it such a much bigger job than it needs to be?
Yeah, well, that's quite a common one, because if you think back, I was kind of compare it to the bookkeeping process, right? Like, I remember when I started the industry years ago, there was this concept of binge bookkeeping. Right, people, you speak to accounting firms that say we don't do bookkeeping. So what happens at the end of the year? They're like, well, the client brings in all of this paperwork and we re-enter it into a system. I'm like, kind of sounds like bookkeeping to me, but you don't want to call it that, and you don't charge very well for it. And I think payments is the same. People do binge payments, like set payment runs. It's like once a month, twice a month. We're going to sit down and we're going to do the payments right now. What that usually means is people either get paid early or late, and the odd person gets paid on the exact day, more luck than anything else. The ability to then use tools that allow you to pay on scheduled due dates. So Libeo does that, like extracts the due date off of the invoice and allows you to say, look, I want to click the button today, but I don't want to pay this invoice until the 15th of September. I don't want to log back in on the 15th of September to do anything, but I want to say now, pay that invoice then. And the tool will then go off and effectively do that for you. So register that it's a planned payment and will go off and effectively make that payment for you on the due date, which means the money stays in your bank a little bit longer. Like one day we'll calculate like the benefit of that for like every £1 you retain in your bank account. How much better off are you across a year, 5 years or 10 years? Like all I know is that I prefer my money to stay in my bank account as long as it possibly can before I pay anybody. But also, I like to think I'm a pretty decent person and like to pay people on time. I don't want to pay people late. I want to withhold the money. We want to pay people efficiently and at the right time. Equally, no real need to pay them early.
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Like for business owners at the moment who are probably feeling a lot of pressure in the economy, prices going up, they're probably quite cautious of cash and they want to make sure they're paying everybody on time, but also don't want to, they're like, what if that money gets spent on something else? Just thinking about the businesses who are really having quite a difficult time at the moment. So maybe they do want to make that payment now so that they know it's been dealt with. I know Libeo is a great tool and we can talk about how Libeo can support people with this. But if you were thinking about our startup audience here who are watching this and maybe haven't really thought through how can I best support my clients with making sure we're maximizing on those payment terms, what would, in an ideal world, that payment process look like? So your starting point is the client, the client receives an invoice from a supplier and that gets logged somewhere. How would you recommend that process should look in an ideal world?
Yeah, the most common way we see it in the UK is, I'll use Xero as an example of bookkeeping, but there's lots of others out there. Your accounts payable is captured in Xero. Effectively, that data then feeds through. So we integrate with Xero. We pull the data every hour into Libeo, where you can then run an approval process over those invoices, decide who needs to approve them. Once you're happy with it, you've got the ones to approve and they've been approved, then you can effectively systemize that payment process and you can pay now or you can pay on due date. And we're a hybrid payment platform. So we support open banking. So you can go through that process, which will mean you still need to log into your bank, but does go straight into your bank. Or we have the concept of the Libeo wallet. So the digital wallet that most people will be familiar with, where you top it up. So the client effectively tops it up and then you don't need to log into the bank to make those payments because you're making them directly out of the wallet. And then those payments are sent back into your accounting software. And I think the key thing there is that often money going out, so that payment side of it, can be a missing piece of the puzzle in getting accurate cash flow information. And I want to know the position of my business right now. I've done my bank rec, I've got all my sales invoices out, but actually the bit maybe I haven't taken into account is all the payments that I've still got to make. So actually being on top of that and understanding it will help bring all of those data sources together, I think, so that bookkeepers can give their clients some really good insights in what they're expecting what they're expecting to pay out, if they've got any cash flow challenges coming up.
And in terms of the conversation that you have with the client off the back of that information, how regularly do you what's your expectation about what bookkeepers are doing? So I'm just thinking about different clients that I've worked with in the past, like the bigger businesses. I might have been in touch with them every week, particularly if they had if they're a shop or something and had heaps of suppliers that they needed to pay on different terms, and we'd be reconciling statements against anything outstanding. But then there might be smaller clients where I probably wouldn't probably manage that payment process for them, but I also would have insight into, well, why have you paid that so quickly? And that might be something to flag on a monthly meeting with them. Should we all be going through a process of looking for these kind of opportunities and regularly touching base is, it's a lot of info to hold in your head, isn't it? So how would you approach that in the best way?
Yeah, I think that, like, for us and like any technology company, right, the goal is to provide a tool that allows people to embed it into their current processes. Like, there may be some changes, but like most business owners kind of know what works for them. So I think, like, in the bookkeeping world, like, you'll have a variety of different engagements, right? Like, whether it's like I'm going to go and like I see these people every week, or I see them once a month, like however that is, then the concept, I think, is that you kind of bake the Libeo solution and the engagement you have with the clients into that. It might be that you do the payment runs for some of them and you do it all. It might be for others that you just do the payroll part of it, right? So we support payroll payments as well. So it might be that you're just doing payroll. You don't touch the supplier invoices, but being able to bulk pay employees through Libeo might be the solution that you provide. It might be that you just prepare the payment. So there's user roles that will allow you to determine what you can do. It might be that I'm just going to prepare the payment, and then the end user, the customer, right, they're going to go through and actually do the payment runs themselves, and they'll log into their bank and they'll do that. So I think it varies on the engagement you got with the client, obviously the fee that they're paying, right, the kind of service that they want to engage with you, but it's kind of making the tool work for you so that you can be as efficient as possible, drive the most value for your customer, but like being able to kind of like cherry pick the bits that you may do, and every client relationship might be slightly different.
Yeah, so that's really good, isn't it? Because you've got opportunity there to have the conversation and find the level that fits right for each of your clients. I'm glad you answered this question. Can you pay the staff as well as bills? That's great. I wasn't aware that you could pay staff as well. So that's really handy. And I think, my ideal client, really, it's a case that they're salon owners. So yes, they do have supplier invoices, but lots they pay on direct debit, but really it's the staff. And so the issues that we find is that, also, can you set up your HMRC payment then for your POA and national insurance?
So you could effectively put that in to the system as a bill. Like with the Xero integration, it doesn't quite work as simply as that, because that doesn't create a bill within Xero. So
no, of course.
Pulling through the bill. So we're starting to have a chat with a few accountants and bookkeepers on how we can make that work. So yes, it's doable, but it's not as slick or as seamless as you may have.
No, that makes sense. And I think it's about those things. So when you're doing the bookkeeping, and for us, it was a case where I was noticing people were forgetting to make their PAYE national insurance payments. People were transposing numbers when they were paying their staff, or making, I've had one client recently that paid the invoice number rather than the amount, and that was like £29,000 or something. So I think those are potentially the opportunities that we can have conversations about. You're human, everybody's human, we make mistakes, but we have an opportunity to streamline this process. And also, have you thought about, maybe the first thing to talk about is the approval process. Sometimes I think we find that especially if it's a small startup or a new business, the managing director maybe is the person ordering the goods and then paying the bills. And that definitely is somewhere where human error could come in. So if you're noticing these things in the bookkeeping that you're doing, then that's the starting point for a conversation. Do you need some more support around this? How can we find a solution that works for yourself and for us? And there really is, that's when you get really embedded in. I definitely find the clients that we're doing the payments for, we have another level of like integration into their business.
Yeah, what I've always found really interesting is when you talk about like payroll and who pays your employees, like that's a service that's really sticky for accountants and bookkeepers. Like people very rarely leave the people that do their payroll. It's really hard to find lots of people who will tell you that they make lots and lots of profit out of doing payroll. It's like, it's a great service, you can make money out of it, but it's not hugely profitable, is the feedback we've typically had. But it's a great starting point and a great service to offer, because you've got access to what's going on, and it allows you then to talk about other services, right, and other kind of support that you can do. And I think like the idea of giving people flexibility is to say that as a bookkeeping firm, do you want 100 clients or do you want 10 clients? Like there's no model is right or wrong, but if you've got 10, obviously you'll want to be doing a lot more for them, you'd imagine, than if you've got 100. So the goal being that actually I can do full service, pretty much everything for these clients, including the payment run, and I've got 10 or 15 clients, or I've got 100 and I'm just doing a little bit less for them, and maybe it's a bit lighter touch.
I completely agree. It's like thinking about what kind of service could I offer if I was to just have this number of clients, and I could really give them absolutely everything that I possibly could, and then choosing which services are right for them. Because if you've got loads of smaller clients, they probably don't need you to be running payroll, and they probably don't need you to be managing their payment runs. So it's really like and we talk about this all the time, knowing who your ideal client is so that you can speak to them directly and support them with the right service that is right for them. It makes everyone's life easier because you're not having all these different systems all over the place and trying to talk about everything. So in terms of the payment, like the service, like that element of running that accounts payable function for the clients, we talked about offering this as a service. How do people generally, like, is this a profitable additional service? Do you think bringing a tool in where it means you're able to manage the payment runs for people means that you are offering an additional value to that business owner? And how would you go about pricing that and having a conversation about bringing that service in?
Yeah, look, I think there's definitely value in it. Like, we hear this from business owners, and I haven't met an accountant or a bookkeeper who hasn't told me that they do the actual payments for like 1 or 2 clients. Usually no one's really nailed being able to do it for large proportion of their base because it's quite manual. But most people do it for some because their clients have been chasing them down or really want that service. So we've got a good few clients and they've been on board a long while. So we said we'd do it for them, but then realized it's actually quite time consuming, and we just haven't been able to roll it out. So there's definitely value in there. And with that, it should definitely be charged for. The cost, I guess, depends on realistically how much work is going to be involved in it. How good a client are they at providing you with the information that you need to be able to do this? Like, are they keeping their accounting software up to date, which then makes it easier to do the payment runs and things like that? But there is definitely a fee, I believe, that like could and should be charged for this, because it's, whilst it's not hugely complicated, like you said, well, you're just making payments in lots of cases. The time it can save and the pain that it can take away from a business owner can be enormous.
Absolutely, yeah. We always charge for it, and we actually offer it to every single client that comes through our doors. But the majority of them aren't at that level, and they're like, "Oh, it's only a handful a month. I'm absolutely fine," and that's great. But we do still have the conversation with them and still check on, even on the few that they're paying. Are they paying at the right time of the month? Are they doing it in an efficient way? And are they checking, are they auditing especially the stock, that comes in? Are they checking everything that comes through and checking that they're getting the right discounts, things like that? Having those conversations, you can still add value without actually doing the service by talking and making sure that they've got a good setup.
Yeah, 100%. Like, we're not a solution for everybody. You need like a certain amount of supplier payment pain to like find Libeo like useful enough. But if Libeo is not a solution for you, then there is still definitely for bookkeepers like an opportunity around helping businesses with their accounts payable processes. So even if it's only 5, 6, 7 supplier invoices a month, just actually making sure that there is a process in place and you've got some guidance or some guidelines on how they deal with that can be really, really important, I think, certainly for like startup businesses where we know the vast majority of them are actually unfortunately going to fail. Being able to keep on top of this stuff, like money coming in and money going out, is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I mean, on something that we do in our month-end checklist is just check the payables. We check receivables and payables and just make a note of the things that we can see and just communicate that. And and this is the kind of thing that we have all this information as bookkeepers at our fingertips, but half the time we know what's going on, but we don't communicate it. So it's about just saying what you see, a bit like catchphrase, actually, communicating it with your clients, and because they've never run a business before, maybe, or they didn't know that there was a right way of doing it. And sometimes what we know as common knowledge isn't common knowledge to everybody else. And and the issues, I mean, think about the issues we have where we don't have Libeo in at the moment, but the issues we have are the trying to get access to bank accounts, like getting a bank mandate so that we can actually physically make the payments. I know that a couple of our clients have used Metro Bank, and my sister's had to physically go to a local, well, quite a big city nearby to actually physically go to the bank and show her ID to actually then become part of, get on the mandate and things like that. We've had to do that a few times. And then other clients have had Starling, which doesn't allow anyone else to have a mandate. So then they've had to set up a Monzo on the side so that we can process their payments through there. So it's not the easiest of service. And also, obviously, you are making payments. You are sending money out of your client's bank account and sending it somewhere. So there's the check and the double check and the triple check, because there's a lot of responsibility there. So there is definitely a fee to be charged, because if you do it wrong, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, definitely. And look, without scaremongering, right, but invoicing fraud is something else that's on the rise. So actually having a process in place where you're checking, validating invoices that come in before you pay them, it is a critical step, whether it's in Libeo or just manually. Having that process where you're making sure that you're not paying the wrong person, you haven't got an invoice that looks like a client that you often use, right? But the account details have changed, but you don't realize, so you just go in and you make that payment, and that money's gone. And unfortunately, it's harder to get that money back than it is to pay it, a lot harder. So there's definitely the risk element, I think, as the world becomes a bit scarier around invoice and payment fraud, and being able to know that when you're running this kind of service, you've got the checks all in place to make sure that you're paying the right people the right amount at the right time.
And we're a cautious profession. This is the stuff that people get really stressed about. So an opportunity where you don't need to be actually in their bank account that does help you to provide that service and have that level of confidence for yourself in your practice, but also for your clients to know that it's managed. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how Libeo works and what actually needs to happen for you to be able to offer this service through your software?
Yeah, look, it's relatively simple, right? We're a SaaS platform, so you subscribe to it, connect in your accounting software. If you wish, you can use Libeo standalone. Actually, in our home market of France, it's because they haven't had the adoption of accounting software. There's no Making Tax Digital. It's typically used in isolation and then just imported manually into accounting software. But either standalone or connected into your accounting software, it's going to pull the payable invoices through, effectively allow you to run that approval process and then make those payments nice and simply. So it's being able to embed it into, I'm not a huge fan of the term, but this tech stack concept, right? Where you've got your general ledger, you've got your OCR technology, you might have go cardless for direct debit payments or recurring payments, Stripe for accounts receivable payments, and then that Libeo solution sits on top of that for having a process for managing and paying your suppliers. And with those kind of 5 products, I think you kind of end up with a good tech stack to really be able to do the vast majority of things that you'd want to do as a bookkeeper.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So just talking about that tech stack, and then so if you have, for example, in Xero, you've got your bills in there with the due date in there, but then you move that all over to Libeo and you've set up your payment dates. When you've got cash flow software, is it picking up the link to Xero, or does it? Do you know what I'm saying? If there's if you're deciding to make a payment on a different date, does it go back again to Xero and tell you when it's going to be paid?
Yes, it goes back in, and it will. So what it will do is go back in once the payment is made. So actually, as the payment's made, it feeds in and says that the payment's obviously been made. So it will show on the bottom of that purchase bills area that you've got in Xero that the payment's made via Libeo. And the way we run it, we don't run a bank account in Xero. We run a chart of account code. So there's a Libeo chart of account code. So if you go into Xero now, you should see that somewhere, and you can see all of the transactions that you've effectively got running through your Libeo account.
Sorry, I was just looking for my unmute button. Joe and I have this terrible habit of talking over each other. For anyone who always wonders why there's a large pause, it's because one of us is we're trying to be polite to each other. So what do people need to do? If they want to have a look at Libeo, understand how it's going to work, decide whether it's right for them and their customers, do they get a free trial? How do they go out and have a look? Or is there some training that they need to take to get involved?
Yeah, well, so we run a free partner program. So we launched it fairly recently. You get Libeo free for your own practice to run on that. Often that's where people like to try it out, like run it on yourself before you speak to any clients about it. Check that it adds value and you think it can work, and then you can go and have those conversations with clients. Like we offer discounts to accounting partners. And we're just in the process of rolling out our community platform that's got all of our content in it. So information you can send to the client, information you could use internally to educate. We kind of want to become a payment community for accountants and bookkeepers. So like, it's a growing area. It's complex under the hood. Like the beauty is trying to make it simple to do this stuff, but actually underneath that, with payments licenses and FCA regulation, it's quite confusing. And if you're a business, the one thing, as soon as someone says payments, it often makes you a little bit nervous because you're like, okay, well, paying, that's money. So we want to be able to have enough content and support for people so that they can really give clients comfort and they can get comfortable with how it all operates. So that's all kind of up and running now. But yeah, the first step is probably drop over to the website, click the register for the partner program, and we'll give them a phone call, and a team will call out, just walk you through what it is, what it does, and see if there's any benefit there. Like right in the minute, the goal is have a play with the software, see if it adds value. If it adds value, then use more of it. If it doesn't, like I'd love to know why, because that's good information for the future. But equally, like you can kind of get on with the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll cross paths again in the future.
Excellent. So what is the website?
So it's www.libeo.io.
Excellent.
Amazing. Oh, Glen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing to find out more about Libeo and really to think about some of the things, we haven't really spoken about the payment process before, but a lot, we're all seeing it all the time. Some people have access to bank accounts. And I think just knowing like there's a solution here that can help us to feel less exposed, I suppose. We were talking about that risk, and that is really helpful. So go and have a look, everybody, and we'll share the links in our notes underneath this wherever you're watching this. Thanks so much, Glen, for that, and thanks everyone for joining us live. We'll be back next week for another podcast.
Bye.
Thank you.